The biggest thing standing in the way of the Marlins making the playoffs is the New York Mets grounds crew. We'll discuss it on today's edition, Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, let's talk about a grounds crew, because that's where we're at this stage of the season. At a time where other teams are clinching the playoffs and they're enjoying champagne showers, it's just showers at Citi Field as a miserable season is now just plagued by rain at the end as the Mets try to get through 162 games, and now they are the biggest obstacle left in the Marlins' way for making the playoffs for the third time in franchise history. Now, I say third because we're not really going to count that 2020 season, are we? This is the third time in a full 162 game schedule that the Miami Marlins should make the playoffs. They're in the driver's seat. If they win out, it's their spot. The Cubs just got beaten bad by the Braves. These two teams now are sitting the same when it comes to the win column. The Cubs half a game back in the loss column, and it could remain that way. And that would be fine because the Marlins have the tiebreaker over the Cubs. But here's the situation that is about to play out and why the Mets and the rain and all of this is going to factor so prominently in what happens for those fighting fish. The game's going on Thursday night. Jesus Luzardo, David Peterson. We'll talk about Peterson in a minute here. Great pitching performance in the 8th inning. There's I think it was a Rafael Ortega RBI single, because that's Mets baseball at the end of 2023. And they carry a lead into that last inning. Grant Hartwig comes out. He gives up some hits. Anthony Kay gives up some hits. The two of them combined to allow 4 hits and 2 runs. The Marlins grab the lead, and they're playing through rain the whole time. Well, skies open up. They decide to put the tarp on the field instead of just trying to play through it and get the damn game in the books, because baseball is the only sport where weird stuff like this happens, where everything has to be aligned, where the weather and the baseball gods have to shine upon the diamond, and you have to play 162 games. Otherwise, I guess the season's invalid. So instead of just saying, look, the Mets, they're out of it. Who cares? Give the Marlins the win. You can't do that. That's not how baseball works. And based on the letter of the law, the only thing they could do is they could proclaim it a completed game through 8 innings in which the Mets were winning 1-0. If Rafael Ortega doesn't drive in that run, I don't even know what the rule changes. I think it would still just go back and it'd be a tied game. Regardless, there's a 3.5-hour delay, I guess. At one point, Skip Schumacher is helping the grounds crew remove the tarp from the field, and then he's yelling at people on the field. And bottom line, through all of this drama, the game is suspended. What does that mean? If the Marlins and the Cubs happen to be at a point where the Cubs could clinch a playoff spot with a Marlins loss against the Mets, they will have to play the final, whatever it is, 4 outs of that game just to get the game in there. Otherwise, anarchy. Nothing can happen. No one could, the entire baseball world will stop. So there's actually a scenario where the Marlins have to go back to New York and play a 4-out game ahead of trying to get ready to go to whatever city and play in the wild card round. Now, I guess the ideal situation would be that they'd be playing the Phillies, but based on how it's shaken out with the Diamondbacks being the second wild card and the Phillies being the first wild card, those two teams would square off. And so I guess in that nightmare scenario, the Marlins would have to play a game against the Mets, then fly over to Milwaukee to face the Brewers, I think. It's crazy. And what makes matters worse for the Marlins and why they're even more pissed at the Mets right now is because there was that rainout that led to a doubleheader, because the Mets didn't cover their field properly after the tropical storm came through and dumped a bunch of water before the series. And they didn't have the tarp out there, so the field didn't dry in time for the first game of this series. And for the Marlins, that meant that they're now ace because Sandy Alcantara's out for the season and Yuri Perez is up against the innings limit. Braxton Garrett's sort of their pseudo ace, and he would have pitched on Tuesday and potentially in the final game of the season. And that all but eliminated from that. Now, they pulled him from his start early. Didn't even fare well against the Mets in that doubleheader, and theoretically he could go. The Marlins, because of how the Cubs have played, are sitting pretty right now, and the Cubs are going to go play the Brewers, and you're sure that the Brewers want to knock the Cubs out of the playoffs. They don't want to face a team in their own division in that wild card round. They would much prefer facing a decimated Marlins than going up against Justin Steele and a better Cubs team. I mean, the Marlins are missing Luis Ariz now probably for the rest of the season with an ankle injury. So there's every chance that this isn't going to matter, that the Brewers will take care of business against the Cubs. The Marlins, they got to go into Pittsburgh and win. And if they're in the position where they have to play this game, it's going to be their own damn fault, because if they sweep the Pirates this weekend, they still make it. They have the tiebreaker. So they can finish a half a game better than the Cubs, and it won't matter, because even if they lost the game, they'd be tied and they'd be in. So the Marlins and all the Marlins fans that I've seen on Twitter can stop their crying, go out, win a series against the Pirates. I'm sure the Brewers are going to take at least one from the Cubs, and you'll be fine. And if you're in a position where you just lose outright against the Pirates and the Cubs win a series and you get to that point where you need this one win to get in, that's on you. You're going to have to deal with it. But it is crazy that this is how the Mets season's ending, because it doesn't even matter to them. Why do they care? Honestly, they prefer the loss at this point. I wonder, you have a 1-run lead in this game, and I can't remember at this point. My brain is not as locked in on Mets baseball as it once was, where I could tell you where Adam Ottavino and Brooks Raley were when it comes to the last time they pitched. But when you're trying to close games with Grant Hartwig and Anthony Kay, you probably don't care about these games anymore. The Mets would love to take the losses. They're still in a position where if they lose out this season, they can end up with better lottery odds than the Angels and end up in that 6th spot where they need to be to avoid their pick dropping. But I digress on all of it. It doesn't matter. It's just funny. You can laugh at the Marlins at this point. If this actually comes into play, like I said, it's on them more than the Mets. But what a weird night. And that's why I'm recording this show now at 1:35 in the morning as I look at the clock now, because we had no idea what was going to happen. And I do want to spend a lot of the show today on David Peterson because he was awesome. Okay. He went 7 scoreless in this game, 113 pitches, still only 66 strikes. So there was some effective wildness there. He walked 4, he scattered 4 hits. But now you look at his season and he finishes with a 5.03 ERA, which is good compared to where he was at when he was the worst pitcher in baseball at one point this year. But overall, what's happened to this guy this season, it is the biggest baffling development that we had to kind of go through when you were looking at what the Mets are supposed. One of the biggest. Obviously Starling Marte. There's been a lot of them, but on the pitching front, like David Peterson's fall is as shocking as anything that happened this year. And I want to spend some time on it in the next segment. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. This is your last chance with the MLB playoffs right around the corner. If you want to play daily fantasy baseball, you got a weekend to do it. The clock is ticking for you to receive a 100-time payout on your cash with daily fantasy baseball. But don't fret, because Sleeper's around for football too. So you can go there, play your dynasty football, daily fantasy football. And basically how this works is you pick more or less on stats for all these star players, and you can combine them for up to a 100-time payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right. You can win big. Plus, they have group chat functionality where you can see and copy your group's picks with the tap of a button. Entries can be made in 30 seconds or less. It's that easy, and they have safe and fast withdrawals. Use promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. If the weather will allow it, the New York Mets are playing the Phillies at 7:10 Eastern time on Friday night. Catch every pitch, the Mets hometown broadcast. SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets. And it is fair to wonder how many more games the Mets even play this season with the weather, because the Phillies have clinched everything. They're good. They don't need this series. And the Mets don't need to play this series, and it's supposed to rain the next 2 days. So you might see like a final game of the season on Sunday, and they can just cancel some games, which at this point, who cares? Let's talk about David Peterson, though, okay? I have been loud wrong on David Peterson more than maybe any other player this year. And that's saying something because, if you ask me my thoughts on Starling Marte before the season, or Max Scherzer before the season, or Jeff McNeil before the season, or Brett Beatty before the season, or Mark Vientos before the season, or during the season, I would have been wrong about all of those guys because I didn't see any of them performing as bad as they ultimately did. Even Carlos Carrasco to a certain extent. But David Peterson, I did a podcast about him being a number 3 starter in Major League Baseball. That's how much I believed in him coming off last year because he was great. 3.83 ERA, 126 strikeouts, and 105 and 2/3 innings pitched. His strikeouts for his strikeout percentage of 27.8% was right there with Justin Verlander. He was awesome. It was identical to a Cy Young winner last year. That's how much he was striking out batters, keeping the ERA down, keeping the ball in the yard, had a home run per 9 less than 1, 2. He was just looking like a fully realized version of a former first-round pick who seemed to be a rotation mainstay for years to come. And the only reason why he wasn't going to be a mainstay was because, or not an opening day mainstay, so to speak, was because the Mets did such a good job adding to their rotation in the offseason, bringing in Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, and Justin Verlander. So he was this great depth. Here's your 6th starter who on some teams could be way better than that. And then this year he goes up and he puts up a 5.03 ERA, a whip that ballooned from 1.33 to 1.57. And here's the big one to me. Last year, his hits per 9 was 7.9. That's not great. Nearly a hit per inning. This year, hits per 9, 10.1. 10.1. He gave up more than a hit per inning. Brutal. And you look at these starts. First start of the season, gave up 8 hits, only gave up 1 run to the same Marlins team that he pitched against tonight. Okay, that was a good start. You look at his April. 4 innings against the Brewers, 5 runs allowed. Next start against the Padres, decent, 2 runs allowed, 5 2/3, okay. Next start, 6 innings against the Dodgers, 6 runs allowed. 5 innings against the Giants, 7 runs allowed. 5 innings against the Braves, 4 runs allowed. He lost 3 of those 4 starts. He actually won the start against the Dodgers where he gave up 6 earned. Okay, you go to May. Start against the Reds, 3 1/3, 4 runs allowed. Against Washington, 5 innings pitched, 6 runs allowed. He had an 8.08 ERA when he got sent down, and we didn't see him for a month. Comes back in June for a spot start. Actually went 6 scoreless. Good outing against the Brewers. Then he pitched again, and really that was when he rejoined the rotation, I guess, looking back at it. And he had his good starts. He did. You look at what he did in July, a 3.12 ERA over 17 1/3 innings pitched. Not bad. August, a 3.27 ERA over 22 innings pitched. September, even after throwing 7 scoreless, though, his ERA for the month was 5.95. He gave up 4 runs first start of the month against the Mariners, 3 against the Twins in 6 innings, 2 against the Reds in 5 2/3, and then 4 in 4 innings pitched against the Phillies. But he racked up strikeouts this month, 29 strikeouts and 19 2/3. He has been an enigma. I can't figure him out. It doesn't make sense to me. And I took so much time tonight trying to find a correlation, looking under the hood as baseball savant, trying to figure it out. One of the things that I saw was this weird correlation, and I've seen it in the past, between throwing the fastball more and throwing the sinker more and how that affects him. 2020, threw his fastball 37.4% of the time, sinker 15.8% of the time. Remember that year, he had a 3.44 ERA. 2021, he throws his sinker 28.7% of the time, fastball 29.9% of the time. So less fastball usage, way more sinker usage, ERA of 5.54. 2022, fastball usage back up over 37%, 37.9%. Sinker back down under to 11.5%. The reason why I looked at this is because I made that argument last year because there was something here. This season, fastball usage, 27.6%, down 12% from last year. Sinker usage, 24.4%. So up significantly. That could be a correlation, right? That's why when his pitching with that sinker more, and the sinker every year, the slugging percentage is like 500 against the pitch. Like, he should just dump it. That's what you think. Then you go to run value, which is a stat that takes the outcome on each pitch and equates it to a certain run value, and it's debited from, throughout the season. It's taken and added to every time you throw a sinker and that ends in at bat. There's a run value assigned to it. His sinker was his best pitch based on run value, despite the fact that he got rocked on it. Run value on the sinker was 4. His slider, which we all know is his best pitch, the run value is his worst pitch, -11. Probably because he walked a lot of batters and he gave up some home runs in probably bigger spots, right? The home runs he gave up on that slider might have been with 2 or 3 runners on. And then the run value of that, that's going to be 3 runs, -3 runs on that. I mean, you give up 3 on home with a pitch, run value pretty bad. So, look, all these stats, all these numbers I'm throwing at you, I might be making your head spin, and I apologize for that. The bottom line is I can't figure it out. I have no idea what happened. Really. I'm putting my hands up. I don't know. His stuff is good. I swear it's good. Watch him pitch when he's locked in like he was tonight, and he's getting the whiffs that he needs to on his slider, and he's working that fastball up in the zone and getting strikes with it and getting people to foul pitch stuff, getting ahead in the count and getting some ground balls. Like, there are times where David Peterson can look so damn good. And then there's this season where, honestly, I don't know how you trust him at all next year. And I don't think you can ever just give him a spot in the rotation. It always has to be, right now at least, go earn it. And even with go earn it, it's wait till an injury opens up an opportunity. The fact that he pitched somewhat decent out of the bullpen, that gives me some optimism. Maybe that's the move, honestly. Maybe you take him, you put him in that pitching lab, you refine his fastball, you turn him into a fastball, slider, changeup guy. You even though the curveball actually worked well this year, but you just simplify things for him and let him, go up against left-handed pitching as a reliever. I don't know, because I also can still say that of this group of 5 starters that have performed well this final month and a half, to Joe Lucchesi, Jose Budo, Tyler McGill, and David Peterson, the guy that I actually believe could be a quality starter in the big leagues more than any other is David Peterson. But his season has just been a complete and utter, I'm not supposed to say bad words on this show, but mind bleep. Like, what happened? I don't know. But you see a start like he put it forth against the Marlins, and you just want to bang your head against the table. At least I do. And be like, dude, where was that all year? Because if David Peterson just put up his July and August and April and May, if he pitched to that low 3 ERA that he did for 2 months earlier in the season when they needed him, different year, completely different year. I mean, you look at some of these losses, and it was right in that stretch in April that carried into May where the Mets were bad, and then they got rid of him and they got better, and then June happened. And not that he would have helped in June necessarily, I don't know, but if they had a better version of David Peterson, I just think that this season goes a lot differently. I think there's a trickle-down effect that happened from how bad all those guys were between Peterson, McGill, Carrasco, that it killed the bullpen. It put more pressure on the top 3 in that rotation. It put pressure on the lineup constantly, where they were just always fighting uphill battles. And it's just not a good recipe for success. So we'll see. We'll see how Peterson can bounce back next year. I mean, he's going to be on the 40-man roster, I'll tell you that much. And they're going to give him a shot again. He'll have a chance to win a job in spring training, I think, based on what I imagine they do this offseason. I think they're going to add 2 starters, not 3, which would theoretically put him in line. So we'll see. We'll see how it all unfolds. But Jeff McNeil's season's over. So I think we should talk about that one. We'll get to it in a minute. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites. Now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers too. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. Want even more value? You can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. With easy substitutions right in the app and best-in-class customer support, DoorDash delivers groceries exactly how you want it. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $20 value when you use the code LOCKEDON at checkout. It's a limited time offer. Terms apply. Again, that's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKEDONMLB. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 off your first order with DoorDash. The New York Mets play the Philadelphia Phillies at 7:10 Eastern Time Friday night. Catch every pitch in the Mets hometown broadcast with SiriusXM, the SXM app. Just search Mets. Jeff McNeil is done for the year. Had a partial tear in his UCL. Luckily, it was his left arm, non-throwing, but he's done. And it ends what was ultimately an average season for Jeff McNeil based on just literally average. And what I mean by that is a 270 batting average, good, I guess. Not for McNeil, but still. A 711 OPS is a little bit below average this year based on the league, but still, like, okay, it's okay. His weighted runs created plus was exactly 100. And that's where I got to the average because, again, WRC plus measures just based on a league average of 100. He was league average. He had 10 home runs, had 10 stolen bases, scored 75, drove in 55. Look at last year, those numbers pretty much hold true. And he played more games this year, even with this late injury. He played 156 games. So I believe that was every game this season until tonight, actually, now that I think about it. Well, no, there was what? Let's look this up. Hold on. Mets are, okay, they played 158 games, so too shy. But he didn't. Well, this game doesn't count. Sorry, it's late. It's pushing up on 2 o'clock Eastern time here as I'm gathering myself on this show. Look, McNeil, we're going to do a deeper dive on it, trying to see if there's anything that we can correlate and figure out, why was he the same this year as he was in 2021 or closer to that than the guy that hit 326 last year and got on base at a 382 clip. It's tough. The fact is, though, despite everything else, Jeff McNeil, he still put up a 2.5 win season. Not great. But like for his contract, like he's not overpaid. That's the one thing I'll say. Like you could say, oh, they shouldn't have given him that deal. When you understand the value that he brought to this team, okay, he defensively to be able to play all over the way Jeff McNeil does as a utility man, that's massive. Okay, there was 31 games that he started in right field, 24 games in left field. The fact that he's playing more right than left for a guy that was supposed to be a second baseman that's transitioned to the outfield in the big leagues, that says something about the versatility. He started 2 games in center. He played an inning at shortstop. He played, an inning at first base. He started, of course, 94 games at second, his primary position. And, the only position's funny he didn't play this year was third base. Played that in the past, didn't play it this season. And catcher. And then, of course, pitcher. But he brings so much with his ability to be above average defensively in all those spots I just laid out. And that's just for roster construction. It's huge. And I still think like ultimately he's going to be closer to the guy he was last year than the guy he was this year offensively moving forward. I don't know if he's going to win another batting title. He's certainly the type of hitter that can. And I mean, we saw Jeff McNeil. Like the thing about it is he did eventually figure it out. The problem is he figured it out when the games didn't matter. And I don't necessarily think that's why he figured it out. I don't know. The team was pressing a lot this season. So, maybe that was part of it. He hit 253 in the first half. He hit 291 in the second half. On base percentage didn't change much, but the slug was about 110 points better. So, the OPS went from 659 to 775. Significantly a better hitter, in the second half than in the first half. And if you sort of look at the month by month, I mean, he was playing his best baseball down the stretch. August, .308 average. September 297 average. On base over 340 each month. Slug was over 500 this month. And you say, look, that was after the trade deadline. I don't know what happened with Jeff McNeil this season. But again, his value to the ball club still has him squarely as a starter for this team moving forward in that super utility role. And it's just a matter of where you play him. And you know what? If it gets to the point where Jeff McNeil is not starting for the New York Mets, well, that's because so much went right with your prospects. Because Luis Angel Acuna is the starting second baseman and he's stealing 50 bases a year. It's because Drew Gilbert has grabbed one of those corner spots in the outfield. And, maybe who knows, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, somebody else has the transition into the outfield, or Jet Williams is playing in the outfield too. You could be in a point, by 2025 where Jet Williams could be in, center. Drew Gilbert can be in right and Brendan Emo could be in left. Who knows? With, Acuna at second, Lindor at short, and either Mauricio or Beatty or Vientos at third and Alonso at first. I mean, we don't know. The Mets could get Juan Soto. And regardless with all of it, if we even get to that point where Jeff McNeil's a guy that's on your bench, he's going to be so valuable because guys always get hurt. And he's the perfect guy to plug into the lineup. And he's always going to be able to be a good at bat. So even though it was a horrible year, I'm not overtly concerned about McNeil moving forward. Although I will say, when you now have two of these seasons in the last 3 years, it is a little bit tougher, right? To have the same belief. I had him going into the season as the second best second baseman in baseball. Now I don't know where he lists. Certainly not second. So I think I'll leave you with that. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I know I said I was going to talk Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani on today's show, but look, that's off-season stuff. Figured with the game and all the stuff that happened today, we should be focused on the last little bit of baseball we get. For all you everydayers, I'll be back on Monday recapping the remainder of the season, unless there's that weird game to be played against the Marlins on Monday. And then we'll get into the offseason content. And if you do want to discuss Ohtani and Soto with me, because I am all in on this stuff, join the subtext, okay? It's in the episode description. You can click there, sign up. You get a 2-week free trial, and you'll get text messages from me. I send them to all the subtexters, and then we can also go back and forth one-on-one as well. So check out the subtext, some cool stuff. Thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. And if you want to catch every pitch in the Mets hometown broadcast this week, you can do so with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets.